Is there a difference between accommodations and modifications? You bet there is. In standard English, they seem like they're the same thing, but when the special education teacher you work with, or when you, as the special education teacher, uses one of these words, each has a very specific meaning, and using these words wrong can have legal complications. Stick with me, and by the end of this video, I'm going to make sure that you will never mistake these two words again. As I've mentioned before, I've been a teacher and been involved in the preparation of teachers for over 30 years. I also have a PhD in educational psychology. What I haven't yet mentioned in these videos is that my PhD was obtained in a program that was kind of like a double major in Ed Psych and Special Ed. I taught Special Ed for 7 years, and most of my teacher preparation experience has been in preparing Special Ed teachers. So when I tell you about accommodations and modifications, believe me, I know what I'm talking about. The problem that comes up with teachers not knowing the difference between the words accommodation and modification is that misunderstandings can grow between Gen Ed and Special Ed teachers when these words are being used. I know in my heart that all teachers have a pretty well-developed sense of justice, and general education teachers want, for the most part, to provide a level playing field for their students when it comes to grading. Because of this, they can be a little resistant to making concessions to their teaching methods and assignments in class that they believe would make things too easy for some students, in these cases students with disabilities, and give some students benefits that wouldn't be given to others. Since general ed teachers have been taught to consistently apply their policies to all the students in their classes, they want to make sure that they can hold all students to the same standards in the everyday sense of the word. Well, surprisingly enough, standards are exactly what sits in the middle of these two words. In order to make sure that we can pull their definitions apart, we have to have a good understanding of academic standards. To do that, we're going to take a look at a Common Core math standard for 2nd grade and use it to illustrate the differences between accommodations and modifications. So let's take a look at this Common Core math standard for 2nd grade in the measurement and data domain. Letter C, work with time and money. The standard says, tell and write time from analog and digital clocks to the nearest 5 minutes using AM and PM. So this is an academic standard for math that 2nd graders should be able to meet by the end of the school year. Most typically developing students will be able to meet it. Here's the definition of accommodations. An accommodation is a service or support that helps a student to fully access the subject matter and instruction and to accurately demonstrate what he or she knows related to the child's disability and the general education curriculum. Students who receive accommodations will benefit from changes to the ways that instruction occurs or the ways assessment is handled that remove barriers caused by the student's disabilities. These changes generally provide access to their meeting the standard that wouldn't otherwise exist. These accommodations can fall into any of these categories: presentation, response, setting, timing, scheduling, or organization. Let's take a look at a few examples of those. So, using the math standard about telling time for a student who has low vision or blindness. They certainly could learn to tell time, but the way that the clocks are presented to them will have to change to overcome the barrier caused by their inability to see them hanging on the wall. For a student who has selective mutism, the telling part of the standard might look or sound different from a typical student, but there are technologies that could be used to substitute for that part without changing the heart of what the standard is asking. Some students may not be able to keep track of the flow of their paperwork associated with assignments and homework, but that doesn't mean that they can't meet the standard. So adding an accommodation to overcome their organizational barrier doesn't mean that a student is failing to meet the academic standards that are being taught to them in their classes. In most situations, an accommodation does not need to be noted on a transcript or need to be offered to all students because not all students have the barrier that is being compensated for. For example, We do not need to keep track of which students get to use reading glasses on reading tests. No, because students who need glasses get to use glasses in order to access the reading test. In a similar fashion, should all students be offered ADHD medicine because some students have ADHD medicine available to them? No. And those who do have access to the medicine do not need to have a notation made on their transcript either. So that takes us to modification. A modification means that there is a change in what is being taught or what is being expected from a student related to the child's disability and the general education curriculum. A modification means that a student is unable to meet the standard as it is written, but that they could get close to the standard if given the opportunity. So maybe we have a second grade student who will be able to tell and write the time from a digital clock to the nearest 5 minutes by the end of the academic year, but they will not be able to do so from an analog clock. This student would be a candidate for receiving a modification of the standard. In this situation, the student would be graded on how well they responded to their own modified standard. Therefore, there would need to be a notation on their report card or transcript that the grade that is shown is not based on the state standard as it was for the other students. So there you have it. An accommodation provides access to the curriculum by removing some sort of barrier put in front of the student by their disability and does not need to be reported because the student is still being held to learning the academic standard just like all the students in Gen Ed. A modification makes a change to the standard to make it more achievable for the student based on the barriers imposed by their disability. A modification does need to be reported on a transcript or a report card because the academic standard to which the student was being compared has been changed. Every situation is different, and an accommodation isn't always better than a modification, but the more modifications we make in the present, the more modifications we're going to need to make in the future. So helping students put in that extra effort or helping students, grown-ups, learn what they need to be effective supports at home is a more sustainable strategy than making hard things easier in the short run. In the long run, I know that I would rather have someone helping clear barriers for me so that I could grow into my full potential compared to having someone decide that my limitations were too great and lowering every bar I encountered. Now, before you go, please do the 4 things that will help this channel reach more people just like you. Hit the like button, subscribe, comment, and share. Of course, there is a 5th thing you could do too, and that's watch more of my videos. It truly is my goal to build a community among teachers and create a place for conversation and commiseration. So please let me know what you need me to talk about in the comments. Until next time, stay strong, stay healthy, and please get some rest.